welcome back to my channel. So today's video, I would like to continue talking to you about smallpox, the angel of death here, which I've been very interested in lately. It is rather gruesome, so as I say, I understand this might not be to everyone's taste, and that's fine. Obviously, you're under no obligation to watch this if you find this sort of thing gruesome, and I will be doing more videos on autism soon. But it's just because I'm very interested in it, and some of you might be interested in it as well. So in my last week, when I was talking about smallpox and what some interesting facts contained in The Angel of Death, the story of smallpox by Gareth Williams, and I'd got up to a bit about variolation, which preceded vaccination by a long period of time. And variolation, unlike vaccination, the variolated individual would actually get sick. The intent was for them to actually get smallpox, but hopefully in a mild way, so that they wouldn't die and they wouldn't develop scarring and they wouldn't get severely ill. They would just get a mild case of smallpox and then they'd hopefully then be immune. The problem was that variolation named after variola, the virus that causes smallpox, didn't stop smallpox from spreading. It actually aided the spread of smallpox because people who were variolated were still infectious, so they could spread it to unvariolated people, which meant that smallpox, it often spawned epidemics. And also the poor often cannot afford variolation, so the wealthy got variolated and then spread the pox to the unvariolated poor as well. Aside from the fact it could be quite dangerous, and it did have a 2% mortality rate, but that was significantly less than the 20 to 60% or even more mortality rate of naturally acquired smallpox. The idea behind variolation was that the virus would be handicapped when it was implanted into the unfriendly environment of the skin. And this was because the immune cells drawn to the sites of tissue damage rapidly picked up the foreign protein and triggered an immune response. Whereas naturally acquired smallpox, the main mode of transmission was through respiratory droplets that would then get breathed in, and the virus would then latch itself onto cells around the lungs, and that obviously meant that the virus would then be, if you like, hidden from the immune system for quite a while. So by the time the immune system became aware of the presence of the virus had already replicated, and it was a lot harder for the immune system then to get the virus under control, and the person could get very ill. Whereas in variolation, because of the way in which the virus is introduced to the body and a smaller amount in a controlled way, and they would get the virus from someone who is mildly infected by smallpox. Sometimes they'd also get it from someone who'd already been variolated, so it's kind of like a sort of chain of variolation to make it more likely that the virus would be mild. In 1840, variolation was banned under the Vaccination Act because by that point in time, vaccination had become established, and variolation was seen as unsafe in comparison to vaccination. However, variolation continued unchecked into the 1970s in India and other countries, and it did set off outbreaks that undermined the vaccination campaign. Now, if you have, you're probably aware, as indeed most people are, the story of cowpox and the milkmaids, and how this is kind of vaccination legend. You know, it's kind of pretty much everyone seems to be aware of it. But the doctor who got the kind of, who's often considered to be the father of vaccination, was Edward Jenner, And he lived in Gloucestershire in England, and that's Derry County because it's lots of cows and lots of dairies historically, and lots of milkmaids in the past. And it had been long kind of like established wisdom amongst the milkmaids and among sort of villagers that milkmaids didn't seem to often get smallpox, and this was because they were often exposed to cowpox, and cowpox is a related virus. It's related to the variola virus. It's a member of the orthopox family of viruses, which variola is a member of. And they were often exposed to cowpox when they were milking infected cows, and if their hands were scratched, the cowpox could then enter their blood, and they would then end up with rather nasty blisters on their hands. It was an unpleasant infection, but it wasn't usually lethal. And it would give them immunity to smallpox. Interestingly, nowadays, by the way, you're most likely to get cowpox from your cat. Also, cowpox is a very rare illness, and even in Gloucestershire, it was actually quite hard for milkmaids to get infected with cowpox, but because they were around cows all the time, they increased their chances of coming into contact with cowpox at least sometime during their career. In parts of the world, cowpox is non-existent as well, and it's quite a rare virus. As I say, nowadays, you're most likely to get it from your cat, from being scratched by your cat. Now, before Jenner, there had been accounts of inoculation of cowpox fluid because of this understanding that getting cowpox would protect you against smallpox. This idea preceded Jenner. It was just sort of like common wisdom amongst the common folk of the Derry counties, and also in Wales as well. There was a long-held understanding, and Jenner worked out, through sort of like trial and error and experimentation, that people who had cowpox did not react to variolation. They didn't react to variolation because they didn't get smallpox after variolation, because they were already immune to smallpox, so variolation didn't set off an infection. Jenner was not the father of vaccination. He's often called the father of vaccination, but that's a bit of a sort of myth. He wasn't the father of vaccination because others had arrived at similar ideas before him, but he did deliver it safely into the world. He kind of, if you like, also did a lot of experimenting as well, and for direct proof of the claim that cowpox protected against smallpox, unprotected subjects had to be given cowpox and later tested by variolation to confirm their immunity to smallpox. And Jenner did a lot of experimenting, and he found that yes, that was true. So he scratched smallpox into the arm of James Phipps, who was the 8-year-old son of Jenner's gardener, and Phipps then got a mild form of cowpox, as expected, and then a few weeks later he was variolated, and it worked. It had no effect. He did not get a mild form of smallpox, as would you normally do from variolation. He didn't get ill, so it worked. Jenner gave cowpox the Latin name variolae vaccinae. Inoculation with cowpox was a lot safer than variolation. Facial scarring never occurred because no pustules broke out beyond the inoculation site, and also it did not spread to other people. Cowpox inoculation did not spread to other people because cowpox isn't spread in the same way that variola is. Cowpox is spread via being scratched, through the blood. It's a different means of transmission. So people inoculated with cowpox, they couldn't spread it to other people. But this vaccination in the early days there was actually a lot of superstition around it because people thought that it was bestial to be injected with cowpox. They even thought, there was even some superstition, people even thought that it might turn people into a cow. That it might turn you into a cow, believe it or not. Okay, so I'm going to move over to video 2 now to carry on talking about smallpox. So, moving on to video number 2.